Good evening, and welcome once again to another segment of We Rise podcast. Miss being here, enjoy being here. Want to have a little fun this evening, as we always try to do. But in having fun, we also try to make the point of educating you about the things that we think are important. And tonight will be the same. Here I am. I have about 9 walls of plaques and proclamations in this office that I have acquired over the years. But this one is going to be the one. We're in the process now of getting ready to build a new headquarters of the Urban League on 7th Avenue. And there's going to be a room that's dedicated to all of the proclamations and citations and plaques that I have received over the years. But this is going to be center stage. CRT, critical race theory. Had this given to me the other day when the governor was in Miami, in Hialeah, to sign the new law condemning the theses that undergird critical race theory on a state policy level. Got a call from the governor's office wanting to know if I could come. Me, go to Hialeah to sign a law about racism? Yep, couldn't wait to go. Because once again, I had an opportunity to make a public statement that would drive home the ridiculousness. Critical race theory? Well, I'm an 82-year-old colored man, born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, on a Sunday night at around 10, 11. My parents tell me, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Grew up in an environment where race was it. You were defined by the color of your skin. Forget about anything else. You were defined by the color of your skin. Everything in that environment was based on the one's skin at that time. If you were black, then the theory was that you were automatically inferior. If you were white, no matter how dumb you were, you had to be smarter than any other person of color simply because you were white. Since you were inferior, then all of the negative things that one could conjure up would always be associated with the color. If you were white, then surely you were good. You would not steal. You were bound by a set of principles that were above all other principles that other people might possess. But if you were black, you had to get back. So that theory about race was not based on anything except color, not philosophy, not politics, not religion, but simply color. So it didn't matter how smart you were, it didn't matter how pretty you was, it didn't matter where you lived, it didn't matter how much education you had. If you looked like this, then it was canceled out. But if you looked like them, then you had a chance. So the lighter you were, the brighter was the potential of your future being a happy and successful one. That was just the theory. Critical or not, that was the reality. We made those adjustments as a people because we knew that that was simply not the case. We knew that we were human. We knew that some of us were very smart and some of us were not so smart and some of us were very handsome and some of us were not so handsome, and we knew that that had nothing to do with the color of our skin but that which we were endowed to by the God that brought us into this thing called life. But even though there were laws which says that we had to behave a certain way, live a certain place, do certain things at certain times simply because of the color of our skin, the theory was very clear. If you black, get back. If you light, you're all right. And if you white, you're out of sight. So when the governor staff called me and said, come and be part of this historic signing, I knew that if I went, then those who are still bound by the color of their skin would simply say that I had sold out once again, and there he goes out there with those Cubans and with that ridiculous governor who is a racist. I knew that if I went, then those who were back in Liberty City would simply not be able to understand because I had no opportunity to share with them while I was gone. But I knew that if I was going to be responsible for making an impact on those who make those decisions about the future of the children that I'm concerned about, that I had to seize upon every opportunity to be with those who make those decisions. So I thought about what they were going to think about when they saw me out there with all those Cubans. But as is normally the case, I put the future of the children ahead of any public relations behavior that I needed to exemplify in order to be admired and held in high esteem by people of color. At the end of the day, I will not allow the children that we work with to believe that it's because of the color of their skin or the attitudes of others who do not look like them about the color of their skin that they either will succeed and or fail this side of heaven or hell. I will not do that. So think what you want to think. I'm going to always cherish this piece because it puts in perspective where I was in the debate about the importance of race in 2022. Went out to Hialeah, got there. It was at Mater Academy, a charter school. Now, here's a guy from Liberty City going to a historic signing about race at a charter school. Magnificent institution. Grounds were impeccable. Buildings were great. And I felt good because I knew that the first charter school in the state of Florida was started in Liberty City. And I knew had we not ventured out adventurously to create that charter school, then the charter school where the governor was getting ready to sign legislation that was going to impact on the future understanding and intelligence about race would not have occurred. So I'm already feeling pretty good because it's at a charter school. And the birth of the charter school started with 69 children in Liberty City. And because we started it, this law was signed in a place called a charter school that grew out of Liberty City. And then when I looked around, I saw the kids dressed in uniforms, dressed in matching colors, boys and girls, neatly dressed, pants above their waists, little girls looking like little girls and not big girl hookers on Biscayne Boulevard. And once again, I said, oh, they've got on uniforms. And it reminded me that the first uniforms mandated in the fourth largest school district in the United States of America happened at Martin Luther King Preschool, Holmes Elementary School, and Jewel Middle High School in Liberty City. We started the uniform movement in the fourth largest school district in Liberty City. We understood the value of being able to identify our kids in the chaos and confusion of the community. And we also recognized the economic saving for us as a community. Instead of having to make sure that we had on a different outfit every day, a different set of shoes every day, a different hairstyle every day, we understood the value of singleness of purpose as it relates to our kids dressing. So when I saw them in uniforms, I say, wow, we were here way before we got here today. And now we're inside. I'm feeling good, even though I know that when I get back to Liberty City, they're going to call me all kinds of names, but that once again, he has sold out. And as is normally the case, anytime you see me doing something that you don't understand, that you think is crazy, just remember that everything that we do at this agency, in our judgment, is in the best interest of cementing a positive atmosphere for our children's future to grow and develop in. So if you don't understand it, remember that it ain't about your understanding. It's about us doing what we think we have to do to send the message that our children will have everything that they need in order to grow up to be happy, healthy, and successful. And when there are intrusions from the outside, which sends the message that we are different simply because of the color of our skin, we will not tolerate that. We have never tolerated that. And we will never allow that to become part of the equation that dictates what we do or don't do in the process. So now I'm feeling good. Hey. Charter school. We founded charter school, uniforms. We started the uniform movement. And now we're out here with this whole notion of critical race theory. That if you are of a certain color, then you have an obligation to understand that it is your fault and the fault of your ancestors that certain things are the condition of affairs in my community. That because we're at a juncture of understanding who we are, where we come from, and where we're going, that we must revisit the theories that pertaining to race and gender. That all of the theories that we may have thought we understood are no longer valid. That when you were born, the doctor may have made a mistake because they looked between your legs and they said because of the fact that you had a certain kind of organ between your legs, then that determined your sex. But now they're saying that that may not have been the case, that the doctor could have made a mistake, that even though you had a penis, that you may have been a girl on the inside. Therefore, it's incumbent upon us to revisit what determines one's sexuality. Is it biological or is it emotion? I'm not going to spend any time debating that. You can believe what you want to believe. But in my house, with those children that we work with, there will be no confusion as to who you are, what you are, why you are, what you are, biologically. And we will not tolerate that being a conversation of discussion amongst the kids that we work with. We will not support anything that even indicates that we ought to. So now I'm here. I'm clear. I'm ready to go in. I go into the holding room where we're waiting on the governor. And I noticed that in the holding room, not surprisingly, I'm the only Black person. After all, it is in Hialeah. It wasn't in Liberty City. It wasn't in Overtown. It wasn't in Black Grove. So that didn't surprise me at all. I also knew that because it was in Hialeah and it was about the critical race theory, that those who may have even thought that it made sense or no sense for it to be, quote unquote, codified in law, might have shown up. I didn't expect to see another Black people there. Number one, simply because of the fact that it was Governor DeSantis, who is a Republican, and therefore we have been taught to believe that there's no good in anybody that is a Republican, that only the good people for us, theoretically speaking, happen to be Democrats. Well, that's another podcast. And when you want to talk about that, we'll talk about how crazy that is also. And then it was in Hialeah. So clearly that if it's in Hialeah by a Republican governor, then it must be anti-us. And therefore, since it's anti-us, because it is in Hialeah with a Republican governor, then anybody that goes to that venue for that press conference has to have either been insane or have sold out. Well, I think it ought to be very clear that I have not sold out. One might judge and question my sanity simply because I don't normally agree with the foolishness that goes on in my community. But I think if you look back over our track record, because our decisions have not been scrawled in selfishness for the agency, but based on our analysis as to what's best for the Black community, you may question why we did it. But at the end, you have to appreciate the results. So I'm in the room. And in the room, all of these powerful people who are going to be making decisions about the future of the state are in this room. In this room is the lieutenant governor. In this room are congresspersons. In this room is the outgoing Secretary of Education for the state of Florida and the due to be appointed Secretary of the state of Florida Education Department is in this room. In this room are the most powerful people in the Hispanic community that are here to be with the governor in the signing of this legislation. Now, why would any responsible leader of our community not be happy to be in this room? Because one of the things I know about race, that when people trust you, that when people respect you, that when people trust and respect you, and then when people trust and respect you and find out that you are not selfish about the things that are important to all of us, then they begin to ignore the color of your skin and gravitate to the content of your character. So now I have a chance in this room with all of these people simply because I dare to come to Hialeah to be a part of this press conference, to meet, to greet, and to develop relationships. The new appointed Commissioner of Education. Since I understand that you used to be the chairman of the State Board of Education, and as soon as I am, quote unquote, installed, I'd like to come and spend some time with you talking about the future of educational deliverables to people of color in your community. In this room, I had a chance to meet the new incoming commissioner of education, that simply because of I dared to go to the signing, I was afforded an opportunity to have access to the person that's going to be in charge of all of the policy execution of the things that we have said are most important to Black folks' potential of survival, education. And had I thought about what was going to be the reaction of my community by my presence at the signing, I would have missed this opportunity. Thank you, Lord, for putting me in the right place at the right time, for allowing me to care enough, to dare enough to do what I knew I had to do in spite of what I knew was going to be the reaction. Thank you, Lord, for that opportunity. One thing I've learned over the years, that when it's right, and nothing can stop you from doing it. So I'm in the room, meeting all these great people, having fun, shaking hands, getting business cards, impressing, making sure that they understood who I was, why I was there, and where I was going to be when it was all over. And now it's time to go out on the stage in front of this big audience of folks. Wasn't too much concern about going out on the stage, because I knew that in the audience, in person, would be a lot of Hispanics, if not mostly Hispanics, because it was in Hialeah. But I knew everybody in that audience, if they had an opportunity to be there, they were there because they believed that critical race theory made no sense, or they believed that it was important for them in terms of establishing their relationship with the governor to be there. Either one is all right with me. But I knew also that by my being there, it sent a message to them about the relationship of what they believe and what I believe. And because of that common belief, when I began to approach them about us doing things together beyond the signing of CRT, the introduction has already been made. And that's important, because one thing that is very clear as we look at the enrollment of the 13 schools in Liberty City, We Rise Village, that what used to be 99.9% Black is no longer that. What used to be an all Black community is no longer that. When I moved to Covenant Palms, our current site for our office facilities, the surrounding community was an all white community. Then it became an all Black community. And now as we prepare to move to 7th Avenue, it is an all Hispanic community. It is not unusual now for me to drive down 12th Avenue and see a Cuban person or a white person panhandling on the corner of 62nd and 12th Avenue. Unheard of. It is not unusual for me to go to Liberty City Elementary School and see every day the change in the demographic makeup of the enrollment of those schools. So in Liberty City, that used to be an all Black community, in the transition from Overtown to Liberty City, is no longer that. So it's incumbent upon us, if we're going to continue to work in Liberty City, that we understand that Liberty City demographically is changing, and therefore who we make relationships with, who we cement partnerships with, has got to change also. So being at the CRT signing allowed me once again to begin to understand how important it's going to be for me to be able to have the ability to immediately have receptivity in the Hispanic community. Wait, hadn't thought about that. But now I see another reason why it was important for me to go to CRT signing in Hialeah. Got there with all of these emotions, with all of these observations, and now out on the stage with all this stuff running through my mind. And the governor is in rare form, making sure that everybody understood why, who, what, under what circumstances. And the signing went off. But then I came back home. I don't know whether or not you can see this. This is a picture of children of color who were at the signing. Okay. And back here in the corner, you can't see me because of the background is black and I'm black, and therefore we sort of mesh together. But I'm back in the back, and the kids are up on the front. And on Facebook, this appeared. And the notion was, look at the faces of those children. They don't want to be there. Look at the faces of those children. They are simply taking advantage of them. Those little pickaninnies are being, quote unquote, taken advantage of. And look who's standing behind in the corner. The old jester himself, T. Willard, putting those children out there to be raped publicly by the governor and those Cubans. You know they don't want to be there. Look at the face of these kids. They don't want to be there. Somebody made them do this, and it must have been that guy standing back in the back who made them do this. It's amazing how, as we have attempted to make the adjustments to the practice of racism by seeing how much we can condemn those who don't, quote unquote, adapt to the rules of acceptance of behavior as we intermingle in the racist environment. So the kids don't want to be there, and the kids are there because we made them go there. What a manipulation of reality. But that's one of the dangers of this media stuff, that we can give you a picture, but we don't give you the details about the picture. Now, whoever put this on Facebook, let me set the record straight. These children were there with their parents. These children were there with their parents. Nobody made their parents come to the signing. But the parents of these children do not want their children to be taught the things that critical race theory teaches at the age that they are at this moment. The parents of these children want to teach their children about those other issues that critical race theory attempts to teach them about in a public setting. Sexuality, what is good and what is bad based on what premise, is not to be taught in the classroom. That's to be taught at home. So these parents understand the awesome negative impacts of critical race theory on the psychosocial development of the children that they have brought into this world. So that's why they were there. They were being responsible parents. And responsible parents know no color. They know character. They know values. They know expectations. They know that children emulate what they have been taught. And if it's crazy, then they grew up crazy. And if it's good, it's what they have been taught. So these children were there. And I responded to this by saying that not only were they there with their parents, but guess what? These parents spoke publicly about the condemnation that should be associated with critical race theory. these parents made it very clear that reading, writing, and arithmetic is what I want my kids to be taught when they go to school. Their morals, their values, the God that they serve, the principles that they live by, those are mine. And I'm not going to turn those over to any stranger, regardless or irrespective of their color or their religion. So why is it that when those of us attempt to be human, those of us who are of color treat us like they used to treat us when things were judged by color? Why is it that we can't have the right to choose what we think is in the best interest of our children without someone concluding that we have sold out? That's just crazy. That if you go, it's because you are a Republican, or if you go, it's because you don't like Black people. Why is it that we keep allowing other folks to define how we ought to behave, what we ought to believe, simply because of the color of our skin? Critical race theory. Now, anybody who believes that it makes sense has to be crazy. But unless there is a conversation amongst us, unless there are others who happen to feel similar to the way I feel, are willing to stand up and say that CRT makes no sense, then we will go down another path of segregation of thought and behavior, simply because somebody else says that what we used to do, we no longer can do. And if you do what you used to do, then something is wrong with you. So I went to the signing, had a chance to meet all of the folks and send the message that in my house, which is Liberty City, there are those of us who believe that race will not define who we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. That we're at a critical juncture in our own psychosexual development as a community. And that is that we are human. And that is some of us are good and some of us are bad. And that is we are human, some of us good and some of us bad. And that we will make our own decisions about what our children will be taught. That we will not allow our children to be indoctrinated by values and principles that are alien to what we believe in as a community. And those who don't believe that we should do that, then to hell with them. And to those who believe that because we do it, something is wrong with us, then to hell with them also. I think we have an obligation as a community. We have an obligation as individuals in a community to do whatever we have to do to make sure that race designation based on skin color no longer should exist. So critical race theory, out the window. Consensus of what is good for us as a community, in the window. And if we are human, before we have the racial identity, then we ought to be allowed to behave as humans first and not codify that behavior simply because of the color of our skin. So here I am at the end of the day with a great piece called Critical Race Theory. Here I am with this great piece, getting ready to enshrine it on the walls with all of these other hundreds of pieces that I have. Here I am prepared to give this piece center stage of all the other pieces because it represents how far we still have to go. The critical race theory is not about advancement of us. The critical race theory is based on the fact that we need to forgive them for what they did to some of us. The critical race theory is not about inferiority. The critical race theory is about the fact that in spite of your quote unquote shortcomings, that you have a right to do what you want to do when you want to do, be what you want to be when you want to be, say what you want to say when you want to say it. And that you must be bound by that which is designated to be appropriate for the color of your skin or that which is between your legs. And if that is contrary to that which is common in the community at large, then something is wrong with you, not with the community. And if you don't get in step, then we will condemn you. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't that sound like 19th century racism? Didn't we say in the race segregation theory that if you black, get back? If you white, you all right? Didn't we say that even though the bus is going to the same place for all of us, that some can sit in the front of the bus and some must sit in the back of the bus simply because of the color of the skin, even though we're going to the same place? Then we say that if you are black, then you automatically are going to steal. So when we went to Burdines and Jordan Marsh and other places to purchase garments, folks just assumed that no matter how impeccably we were dressed, no matter how many credit cards we had, that we bad watching, simply because the critical race theory said that all black people steal. Did we say at the height of the critical race theory that all black people are lazy? They don't want to work. All they want to do is have children and be on welfare? Wasn't that part of the critical race theory of suppression for us, which gave comfort to those who exercised the rules to keep us in our place because it was the theory of practice? So why would we, in 2021, let somebody think that this generation that's on watch is insane? And it's because we have demonstrated that we are. It's because that there are thousands of folks in Liberty City who know that critical race theory makes no sense. But because of the human need to be admired and accepted by the community, they remain silent. Critical race theory, the fear thereof, puts you in a position where you may not want to do what we decided that we had to do. But I suggest to you that it is the denial of the expression of that which is most important in spite of the proposed ridicule that allows us to move the needle. So critical race theory is out the window, ought to be squashed, ought to be condemned. And anybody who thinks that it has any meaningful contribution that it's going to make to the advancement of us has to be totally insane or they don't understand what's going on. Do you think that if critical race theory had some validity as it relates to resolving the problems that are associated with high unemployment in Liberty City, that we would not have embraced it a long time ago? Do you think that critical race theory is the foundation for the number of families in Liberty City that are female head of household? Do you think that critical race theory is the contributing factor to the disproportionate number of Black men who are incarcerated? Do you think that critical race theory is the reason why achievement in my 13 schools historically is below the expectations of everybody else. Do you think, is there anybody who can quantify to my satisfaction that the things that we now find ourselves dealing with in 2022 as it relates to housing, employment, health, welfare, education is housed in a theory of implementation and evaluation based on race? If you do, come by in the morning, bring me the proof, and I'll give you $100 for each one of the validated supportive items that you can share with me. It doesn't exist. So we've got to stop letting people play with our emotions. We've got to stop letting people use us towards their own ends. Now, isn't it strange? Who is the voice of critical race theory? It ain't the NAACP. It's not the National Urban League. It's not the Congressional Black Caucus. Who is it? It is those who profit continuously for the manipulation of our emotions around race. It is those who seize upon every moment to remind us or to convince us that the reasons why we're in the place that we are 300 years after 1619 plus, the reason why we are where we are today in comparison to everybody else, the reasons why we are still at the bottom of the totem pole, and the Cubans came and the Haitians came and everybody else came and they moved on beyond us. The reason why we are at the bottom of achievement. The list goes on and on. The reason why, the reason why, the reason why. And someone with that critical race theory philosophy will say it's because of the color of your skin. And the real reason why is because all white people are bad. And anybody that is not black is also bad. So the governor, as he signs this critical race theory, is doing it because he is anti-black. He's anti-black. So it's no longer the Cubans who are anti-black. It is the Cubans who are anti-black because the Cubans are anti-black, because the whites are anti-black, and therefore anybody that's not black is anti-black. Kind of crazy. But if you get caught up in that insanity, then it will pit you against yourself. So I say to my friends who want to condemn old T. Willard for once again doing what he thought he had to do on behalf of the future of the children, that your condemnation holds no water. That with leadership goes an obligation to do the things that are right, that moves the group in spite of how it might be interpreted by the masses at large. So I had to accept the invitation to go to Hialeah to be with the governor. I understood what would be all of the reactions of those who did not understand why I needed to be there. I knew that folks would mischaracter my motivations for going, but that's the price that you pay for saying that you care. That's the price that you pay for doing what you have to do in spite of what folks might think you ought to be doing. So rest assured that I was really very, very wide awake. I understood why I was going. I knew that once I got there, what the reaction was going to be. But I thought about all of that for about maybe 2 minutes. When the governor called, I knew that I was going uh, in spite of what might be the reactions. And I'm glad that I did, because now I have said to the governor and to all that once again, whatever is required to send the message that I am human first, I make my choices based on my humanity. I would not be influenced by what you think about me, and I would not allow the color of my skin to dictate what I ought to think. And at the end of the day, I have to be happy with me, because I need to have critical consensus about my own behavior and my motivation. And when that happens, then things change. And when it doesn't happen, then things remain the same. So it's not law, whether you like it or not. It is the law. And whether you like it or not, it will be administered. Whether you like it or not, if you dare, if you dare not to adhere to that law, then you will be punished. Now, here's what's going to happen. There will be all of the hullabaloo about the critical race theory law. And once it dies down, we'll go on to the next thing, waiting once again for somebody else to do something else that will say to us that they are not racist. And once again, we will get emotionally upset about that. So the path is clear. That is not what they do, is what they know will be our reaction to what they do. And as long as we give them the reaction that they know that they're going to get, then they do what they think they have to do to always empower and lift themselves up at the expense of my emotions. So if the critical race theory was so anti-Black folks, then I should have met out at the signing. Black folks out front with signs saying down with DeSantis, down with all white folks. We should have been outraged if we were serious about it. I know that when we were serious about things in the 60s, we had our own critical race theory. It was consensus of reaction tactics. When we thought that something was wrong, we all lined up. We thought that segregation was wrong, and our critical race theory was that we were going to demonstrate. And every Black person, whether they believed that what we were doing was the thing that we should be doing, they supported us demonstrating. And because we were committed to that being the appropriate methodology in order to bring about change, we did that. I can remember back in undergraduate school when we began to picket downtown Charlotte restaurants to let us sit down at the lunch counter. We picketed every day. We organized ourselves. And those who had classes in the morning, they went to classes in the morning. And those who had classes in the afternoon, they picketed in the morning. And then we came off and went to class. And then those who had classes in the morning came and got us in the afternoon. We believed that consensus of the response tactic was appropriate. And that there were those who didn't believe that we ought to be picketing at all, that it was just the white folks who's going to put us in jail and y'all going to get all of us killed. But guess what? They never denounced publicly what they thought we should or should not be doing. So even though we had consensus of racial tactics being used, those who disagreed did not publicly pronounce that disagreement. It's not true now, simply because of the fact that I was at the signing. Those who disagreed now are going to condemn me, not celebrate my presence, not celebrate the fact that I cared enough to go. And because I cared enough to go, I was able to make some relationship, develop a new expectation, a new image of Black leadership in 2022. Oh, all of that would be ignored. They would simply say that there he goes again and he has sold out. You get that right. I did. I sold out. I sold out by exhibiting the right kind of behavior that would allow me to buy in. I sold out by simply saying that I am the captain of my ship, that I would do what I have to do in order to make sure that those who own my ship land safely in the harbor of success and prosperity. That if in navigating those waters to get there, if they're rough, turbulent, then so be it. But the most important thing is to get there, because that's where the paradise is. That's where the hope is. And that's where we have to be. And that's what we have to do whenever an opportunity presents itself that allows us to be on the ship of freedom. So that's what I thought would be my experience going forward. And that's what I've learned to be the result of my experience. So for those who said that I should not have been there, for those who tried to say that I was part of some conspiracy to bring Black children and hold them up against their will, to those who believe that simply because of the fact that the governor is Hispanic, simply because of the fact that the governor is Hispanic and is a Republican, that all of his motivation has to be selfishly anti-us. To those who believe that, who articulate that, then they must still be at 1619 and not 2022. Would I do it again? Oh, yes, I'm going to do it again before the end of the day. Is it important for those of us who believe that we have to do what we have to do in order to get things done for all of us? Yeah. History is replete with that kind of commitment, that we have individuals from Martin to Roy Wilkins to Whitney Young to Malcolm X. The list goes on of those who dared to stand up and be alone on doing what a lot of folks thought and knew had to be done, but simply were not prepared to pay the social, emotional price for doing it. We cannot send the message that we will allow folks to redefine who we are, what we're going to be, and what we're going to allow them to make our children believe that they can or cannot be in their own selfish moments of redemption or cementing their relationships going forward. Because if critical race theory catches on, it does not move the needle for Black people. Let's be very clear about that. This is not about moving the needle for us. This is about giving psychological relief for the condemnation of what those who are articulating it believe that their parents did, and therefore we should forgive them going forward. I could care less about what the parents did. I'm more concerned about what the governor decided to do. And the governor decided that in spite of, if not because of, I will pass a law and make sure that folks understand that that will not be on my watch. And he's serious about it. If you don't believe he's serious, ask Disney World. Ask Disney World. Who would have thought that Disney World would pay the price that they are going to pay because they decided to be woke in the administration of the things that happened at Disney World? Who would have thought that this governor would be so adamant about his beliefs and commitment to making sure that the environment in which the children in the state of Florida grew up in is one that is positive and wholesome? Who would have thought that this governor would take on Walt Disney, Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, Donald Duck, Porky Pig, Bugs Bunny? Who would have thought that? But I think what we have seen is that if you are committed to doing what is right, then you don't worry about the penalty. So when I saw that the governor was prepared to pay whatever price he had to pay from corporate America about enforcing some principles that are in the best interest of the future of all of us, how dare I even hesitate about whether or not I'm going to go to the signing? I went. Feel good about it. That's why I'm doing the podcast. Not to ask for an understanding, not to ask for forgiveness, not to enshrine myself with the governor and others who said, boy, we're so glad that you're here because it takes the issue of selfishness out of this signing. I could care less about that. I went because I wanted the children that you see on this picture to know that not only did their parents care enough about them to bring them there, but there were other people who looked just like them who were there. And therefore, this was not only parents who care, but it was others who looked like their parents who care. And maybe it sends the message that all of us can care. And that's the message that we have to send. Critical race theory, practice it, no. Accept it, no. Being human is the most important thing. Good being with you this evening. Critically, as I have said it before, it's always great. If you want the best of your life, to be the best of your life, to be the best of your life, then you've got to do things that colored people did doing the worst of their life. It makes you do things that you've got to do simply because they've got to be done. God bless you, and I'll see you next week.
About most of our lives, but we've made it still standing 'cause they can't destroy what's inside. Black people keep going.